You know, sometimes a single personal story can just explode and become something much, much bigger. We're going to talk about one of those moments today. How did one woman's plea for financial support after her divorce manage to spark a national crisis? Let's get into it. This is the story of the Shah Bano case. So this is Shah Bano Begum, and in the late 1970s, she was just a regular person, known mostly to her family and her community in Indore. But fast forward just a few years, and her name, well, it became a symbol for this huge, complicated clash between law, religion, and politics that swept across the entire country. And her story, it really starts in a very simple, very human way. It's 1978. She's 62 years old. She's been married for over 40 years, and she's a mother of 5. And then she's divorced by her husband. So what does she do? She goes to court asking for something pretty basic: financial support, just enough to get by. That's it. A totally personal plea. So the big question is, how on earth did that, a straightforward request for maintenance, escalate into a political firestorm, one that literally divided the nation and made people question the very nature of law in India? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down right now. Okay, so to really get how this all blew up, we've got to go back to the beginning. Back to the personal struggle that kicked off all of these massive events. So here are the basic facts. Shah Bano, she's from Indore. After 40 years of marriage, her husband, who was actually a pretty well-known lawyer, divorces her. She's basically left with nothing. So she turns to a law that's available to any Indian citizen, Section 125 of the Criminal Procedure Code, and files for maintenance. And that one simple legal act, well, that was the spark that lit the fuse. And that single spark, it just cracked open this huge fault line running right through India's legal system. On one side, you have secular law, the law that's supposed to apply to everyone, right? And on the other, you have personal laws, which are specific to different religious communities and govern things like marriage and divorce. So here's the heart of the legal fight. Shah Bano's entire case was built on Section 125. It's a secular law, and it says a husband has to support his ex-wife if she can't support herself. Pretty clear. But her husband's argument was completely different. He said that under Muslim personal law, his financial responsibility was over after a very specific period right after the divorce. Now, that period is called the iddah. It's basically a waiting period, usually about 3 months. And her husband's argument was, look, once that's over and I've paid what's required, my duty is done. That's what my personal law says. So the huge question for the courts became, which law wins, the secular one or the personal one? So the case works its way up through the court system, and eventually it lands right at the top, the Supreme Court of India. And in 1985, they handed down a decision that was, and I mean this, truly a landmark judgment. And the court, they were crystal clear. They said, listen, Section 125 is a secular law. It has nothing to do with religion, and because of that, it applies to every citizen, and that absolutely includes divorced Muslim women. No exceptions. And here's the real kicker. The court went even further. They ruled that personal law can't just override the secular law. When the two are in direct conflict, the law that's designed to protect the vulnerable, to prevent someone from falling into poverty, that's the one that has to win. It was a huge statement about putting basic human dignity first. So, you can imagine, the implications of this were just massive. I mean, first, it strongly supported the constitutional idea of equality for everyone. Second, it made it super clear that the word wife in this law includes a divorced wife. And it also kind of nudged the door open on that long-running debate about a uniform civil code for all Indians. But for Shah Bano herself, the most important thing was simple. The court said, yes, you are entitled to maintenance. You might think, okay, great, legal victory, story over. But no, not even close. In fact, this was just the beginning of a massive political and social firestorm that was about to tear the country apart. And things happened so fast. In early 1985, everyone's celebrating this progressive verdict. But just a few months later, widespread protests erupt, led by conservative groups who are saying, this is the government interfering in our religion. The political pressure just builds and builds until, by 1986, the government does something pretty drastic and, frankly, very controversial. The country was just split right down the middle. On one side, you had women's rights activists and secularists who were thrilled. They saw this as a huge win for equality. But on the other side, some very powerful conservative groups were protesting loudly. And the central government, well, they got caught in the middle. They were worried about losing votes,
So they completely backtracked and decided to pass a whole new law.
All right, so let's talk about the aftermath. What is the lasting legacy of this case and of the new law that the government passed? Because it really did change the entire conversation about law and religion in India. So, this new law was called the Muslim Women Act of 1986. And what it did was, well, it pretty much completely undid the Supreme Court's decision. It said a husband only had to pay maintenance during that 3-month iddat period. After that, the responsibility to support the woman fell to her family or to a community board. A lot of people saw this as a huge step backward, a political move that sacrificed gender justice just to calm down the protests. And that's why, in the end, the Shah Bano case became this incredible flashpoint. It just poured gasoline on the fire of this fierce, ongoing debate in India. Should we have separate personal laws for different religions, or should there be one single, uniform civil code for everybody? And believe me, that's a debate that is still shaping Indian politics today. So, what started as one 62-year-old woman's simple plea for help leaves all of us with this massive, unresolved question. It's something India is still wrestling with decades later. When secular laws designed to protect individual rights clash with religious personal laws, whose rights come out on top?